We are back for another week of Red Birth Green After Dark. I am Erica G, the director at Red Birth Green, and I have Rowan with me tonight. And we are here to just chat some more, talk about it, as we like to say. We're really glad that you are continuing to tune in with us and have these more challenging conversations, and that hopefully this feels like a brave space and a safe space for you to show up and be vulnerable and transparent. And yeah, we're just really grateful that you continue to show up with us. So bring your friends, share it with your friends, and yeah, let's get into it for tonight. I'm actually really excited. I love talking about parenting related topics. A mom of 4 kiddos in various age ranges, and just knowing what their needs are as young people and knowing what that looked like when they were even younger. I'm really excited to talk tonight about expanding our ways of being surrounding having the talk. We've been chatting about expanding our vocabulary when it comes to things related to reproductive anatomy and the gender spectrum and all of these things that our young people are honestly so much better at than we are. They just take it in stride and run with it, which means that we have to catch up. And that's what this space is for us to do a little bit of catching up, and most importantly, to do it together. So Rowan is not a parent yet, but I feel like she has a really valuable voice in this conversation because of the young people that she works with, and also because she was a young person at one point in time as well, as we all were, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's dive in.
Let's do it. Yeah, just a little more like background on like where I'm coming from with this conversation is that I, like Erica said, like I'm not a mom, I'm not a parent, and I have played a like very close part in the lives of a lot of young people, some of whom are in my family and other ones who I'm teaching in preschool or summer camp or whatever it might be. And I'm also an OWL facilitator, an Our Whole Lives facilitator. So talking about this kind of stuff with kids is a huge part of my life and what I think about on literally a daily basis. So that's where I'm coming from here.
Yeah, I feel like you have like the professional expertise for us, like in this conversation, and how we can lean in more almost as facilitators for our own kids, right? Like an extension of the work that you are trained to do, but how we can bring some more of that home and just make it a little more comfortable. Because let's be honest, it's uncomfortable to talk about these things with our children. We've touched on that a little bit over these weeks of conversation, and we just want to help it be less so, or even how to be uncomfortable or how to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? I don't know if that will ever go away, like the discomfort or the awkwardness, not just for us, but also for our kids. Our kids usually don't want to talk with us about these things. What I have found particularly helpful is relying on text messaging. There definitely, it takes away a bit of that. Maybe it encourages vulnerability is a better way, I guess, of saying it. Because they don't have to like sit and look at you in the face, right? But you can just go back and forth. And I also was just in a conversation a couple weeks ago with a family. They have a shared doc that they've been utilizing to like drop things in. I talked to another mom who started a notebook with her teenage daughter, and it was just presented very innocuously, like, hey, this is here for us to communicate, and you can use it or not. Totally fine. I won't be offended. But if you have questions that you don't want to talk to me about, like write them in here and then just like leave it in a place where I'm going to see it. And I was like, how wonderful to just take all the pressure away. But the best part is that she went and did something with one of her other kids and came back, and her daughter had already like scurried off with the notebook and was like went like right in with it. And I was like,
they have the questions. They always have the questions. It's just about the positivity, right? It's about the next positivity. And like I love that idea because that's totally like the at-home question box, right? in like our whole lives curriculum and a lot of in-person sex ed curriculums especially, or curricula, like that question box is a huge piece, because even when it's a space that's cultivated to be confidential and comfortable and safe, it can still be really hard, especially in those like adolescent years, like early teen years, to voice those questions. It can feel really embarrassing. They're usually embarrassed about the more important questions. And so having that space to like ask things either anonymously or without the like face-to-face, like, oh, I'm super uncomfortable making eye contact with my mom and talking about this right now. Like, I really don't want to do that. That's awesome. I love that.
I know. Because, obviously at home, like you can never have like that piece of anonymity because we know how our kids write, even if there's not a name attached to it, we're like, this is pretty sure this is this person.
Right.
But again, to take away the pressure of that face-to-face conversation and feeling so much intensity that can be there, I was just like, that is absolutely brilliant. I loved it so much. So sharing that tip with everyone. How can you incorporate that into your home? Honestly, with kids of any age. I know that there's a phrase out there that 9 is fine, but 8 is better for starting the conversations when it comes to sexuality and, body literacy and things like that. I Let's talk about that a little bit. I would love to have you weigh in on that, Rowan.
Yeah, I would love to, because so there's definitely the piece of like getting into some of the more in-depth stuff when we're coming about that like 8-9 range, and starting those conversations even earlier, just with like what is commonly referred to as sex positivity, right? So it's cultivating the home as a space where it's okay, like little kids especially are constantly touching themselves, right? They're exploring their bodies, they're exploring what it feels like to feel like to have a body, that somatic piece, right? And a lot of people, like a lot of parents, they see that and they kind of freak out because they're like, like I don't want them to do that in public. And so like starting that conversation early by saying, hey, I see you doing that, and that's great, and you should get to know your body, and I love it, and these are the spaces where it's okay to do that, and these are the spaces where it's not okay to do that, right? And so it's like, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be, it's kind of similar like to body positivity. It doesn't have to be positivity. It can start with neutrality, right? We can start with sex neutrality and sex and body neutrality, and they're in the same vein, right? Because if we're expecting people to go from like a puritanical sex negative society immediately to like a sex positive, like that's not gonna happen.
No.
And also you can be a parent who's doing this in their home, and there's still going to be all these media influences and other people's values coming into play when your kids are interacting with other kids. Like it's always going to be like that. And so that also kind of harkens back to the community and collective impact we were talking about last week. Like until this is more common, until that kind of language in the home is more common, it's still going to be hard to like find some comfort in those conversations with your kids, because regardless of what you do, there's always going to be stigma attached.
Absolutely.
You learn that from everywhere. And that is impossible.
Of Skip going straight, like Chuck Perfect, right? Because perfect is it would be fully in being able to like live in a space of positivity. But starting with neutrality, I think, is such a wonderful starting place for a lot of people, because like that's the spectrum, right? Like if we are in that very puritanical, very traditional conservative mindset about the language that you use, the spaces that are acceptable for these types of things, how and when you should or could explore your own body, like that is always in such a heavy, very shame-filled conversation in space, right?
Yeah.
And so if we can just start to swing the pendulum in a different direction and move to that space of neutrality, I feel like that could be a more comfortable starting place for a lot of families.
Totally, because it also, like, talking about sex positivity, like you've got your kids who are learning things, but you also have the parents who have a lifetime of ingrained thoughts and behaviors inside of them. So there's also this like unpacking and undoing of all of that at the same time. So that neutrality is just a much like safer and easier place to like go, and then maybe we can work on positivity from there.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of beautiful things can happen in that space of neutrality, right? Like because I think like I think people might assume like, why would I want to be neutral, right? Like positive is good. Well, let's move away from the language of dualities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Neutrality is actually a really good space to be. Beautiful things can happen in that neutral space. And also the neutrality is a spectrum. So like we can, move back and forth and achieve better moments than others, and that's okay. And yeah, I just think about all of the unlearning process for the grown-ups in the situation, right? We do have so much packing to do. And I refer to those moments as the great unlearn, right? And it can be applied to so many things, to birth, to parenting, to sexuality, to, gender language, as we've been talking about. Like, that's all it is. It's the great unlearn. Let go of that which no longer serves you or serves our community, or our village the best. And let's bring in new words and new opportunities of how we interact with one another. Again, this is the space for that. Like, let us support you. We can call this Thursday school. Thursday school while you're going through your great unlearn, and just keep showing up, and we're going to keep saying you're doing a great job, sweetie. Keep at it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that. And I think like the neutrality piece also like allows for more space for individual development inside of sexuality and inside of gender, right? Because by looking at neutrality rather than positivity, we're not saying like sex is good and you should have it and you need to have it, because not everybody wants to. So that space of neutrality, like, this is a thing that people do. It can be really great, whatever, awesome. But like, we don't have to be attaching value to those things necessarily. It's creating space for kids to make their own decisions about what feels good in their bodies, and also like not attaching positivity to their specific like body parts, so as to sort of like I want there to be positivity about body parts, and I want there to be recognition that not everybody is going to have a positive connection to their body parts, because body dysmorphia is a real thing.
Yes.
And so I think in that space, the neutrality and the positivity are both important, and that's kind of like a nuanced thing to navigate. If that makes sense.
Oh, it does. It makes total sense, actually. Of course, we are in the business of bodies and babies, right? So yes, it makes sense to me. But if it doesn't make sense to anyone who's joining us right now, pop in the comments and let us know, and we'll unpack it further, right? That's what the space is for, is to say, I think I get it, but could you go a little bit deeper? The answer is always going to be yes, absolutely. We love that. So I want to talk about shame for a second, maybe more than a second, because so many interactions that many of us older adults have experienced are really rooted in shame. And I think that can then lead into a place of fear, and like just kind of do some swirly things in the head, right? That can really trip us up, and be like, that shame can make us believe that we actually are not equipped to do any of this.
Yeah.
And so we just don't.
That we're not equipped, but that it's wrong.
That too.
It's harmful, right? Because like, look at Kellogg and look at graham crackers. Both like cereals, like Kellogg's, I know there's a specific cereal and I can't remember which one, but there's a cereal and there's graham crackers. And both of those foods that are super popular today were manufactured to prevent kids from masturbating. That was the purpose of those things coming on the market. So like, we're dealing with real ingrained shame.
Yes. Can you imagine, like, if you have a young child, especially like I'm thinking the toddler preschool age, right? Where like they're especially little boys, or like who were, babies that were assigned male at birth, like constantly have their hand in their pants. Like, it's just a thing. And why not? Like, there's this piece of my body that feels really good when I touch it. Like that's, I'm feeling nervous. Oh, this thing will help me feel good. I'm tired. Oh, this will bring me comfort. Like it's just a natural thing. Again, like that's a great place to start with neutrality. If you have kiddos of that age range in your house, like let it be and find ways to set boundaries that you are comfortable with, right? No, they should not necessarily be walking around the playground with their hand in their pants, but like
Right.
come on. So like but have those conversations.
Modulation.
But thinking about that age range in particular, that the mindset was, oh, you're doing this thing here, have this snack, like eat this snack. What how we wonder why so many people even still to this day have issues surrounding food and body image because it was like, don't do this thing, eat this instead. Like that doesn't even make any sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And something that just like came up when you were saying that is like, so me, I am me. I am like fertility, body literacy, sexual reproductive health. Like that's my whole cup of tea. And still, when I'm working at the preschool and a kid touches themselves in an inappropriate way, my immediate reaction is fear and then anger.
Why are you doing that? Right?
Exactly. And that is because I'm afraid if that were my kid and I were in public and somebody else saw that, I might get in trouble. And then let's talk about that in Black bodies. Right. It's not right anymore. Right? Like that fear is real because so many people still carry, like, it's not just the first response, but it's the response is anger and shame when they see behaviors like that. And to like verbally beat it out of your child to not do that because it's not okay. Right? And so then even when I myself am in the place that I am and believe the things that I believe, that's still my most visceral reaction to those things because it's a fear, and I don't even have a kid.
Right. But we're culturally trained. We're culturally trained to go there as the primary response. Like that's something also that should be done in secret, right? Mm-hmm. Like not even just in private. That should be done in secret.
Because shame.
Because shame. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, like that's such a good, like coming into that place of neutrality, specifically around that area and being able to have the conversation with your child that acknowledges like, hey, I see you doing this, right? We're not just going to pretend it's not happening. Mm-hmm. I see you doing this. It makes total sense, right? And you should do those things. And these are the places where it's okay, right? Because then if that conversation is happening at home on a regular basis, it's much less likely then that child is going to go to preschool and think that that's the appropriate time to explore their body.
Yeah, because they haven't been told anything otherwise. It hasn't been contextualized for them.
Yes.
Totally. Yeah. I will never, ever forget the talk my mom had with me because I'll preface that by saying I was privileged as a kid to go through pretty much every single Our Whole Lives curriculum. And then I also was privileged enough to be just the right age when Girls in the Wild existed in Kalamazoo, and I got to go through that program 3 times. And so, like, sex positivity and reproductive health have always been in my brain. Like, it wasn't until I really started to get out into the world and talk to other people my age that I was like, oh, you don't actually even know what your vagina is, let alone your clitoris. Like, you really don't. Okay, wow, nobody ever told you that. And that was baffling to me because of my upbringing. And I will never forget the conversation that my mom had with me. The only talk we had to have, because she had already provided me with so much awesome education externally, was, and this was probably when I was about 11 or 12. She said, it's a good idea to touch yourself and learn what feels good so someday you can teach somebody else. And that was it. That was the whole conversation. And that simple sentence has stuck with me forever since then. Because we can't even have conversations about consent if we don't know how to give it because we don't know what feels good.
Yes.
And we mistake feeling like uncomfortable and discomfort and pain for being what it's supposed to be. right? How often do you hear sex is always going to be painful the first time?
So often. I feel like that's almost like just carte blanche like statement that's
Yeah.
made. Like, yeah, your first time is going to be awful. But does it have to be?
No.
No.
And there might be pain associated with it. Like it's a whole new thing happening in an area of your body that maybe hasn't been explored in that way before, and maybe it has, but it doesn't have to be a painful experience, an uncomfortable experience.
Right. It can also be neutral,
Yeah.
right? It
Totally.
wasn't great, but it didn't suck. Okay, cool. I feel like that's so empowering to have that conversation with your young people,
Mhm.
right? Like, especially when they hit that puberty age, like right on the cusp, right, of starting menses, I think is an excellent time to have that conversation because hormones start to do so many things
Thanks.
after that hits, and then curiosity, like everything just kind of snowballs and they lose a little bit of their sense for a while, and that's okay. Like again, they're allowed to do that in that time period of their life, but if you had that conversation and you've laid a foundation that leads into that where they know that like these are the things that really are okay, even if I'm being given other messages from friends or from school or from church or from whatever, like that this is the actual truth. And some of that leans into, just what it takes to build a really deep and trusted relationship with your young people as well. I think
Definitely.
that that's another place, like another piece of this conversation that's important to tuck into. Um, that what does that look like? How do we do that? What does that start? Because
Yeah.
if we haven't built a trusted relationship with our young people, how can we expect them to go out and build trusted relationships with other peers, with other adults in relationships? When they get to that place, if they don't know what it looks like how on earth are they supposed to replicate it? So,
Totally.
um, yeah, what has that shown up for, or what does that look like in your life, Rowan? Like, having trusted relationships with, parents and things like that.
Like, are you asking about like my relationship with my parents and trusting them, or like looking at the kids that I've worked with and their relationships with their
Either
parents?
or.
All those things cool. Yeah, I mean, like I just said, like my relationship with my parents, I feel like I can talk to them about anything. And I can. And like even my dad, like I could literally talk to him about anything. And I don't know how many people can say that.
Yeah.
Especially somebody who was assigned female at birth, like I literally can have any conversation with my dad and be like, yeah, I'm bleeding. It really hurts today. I don't want to. Like, it's so easy. And then I was thinking about this earlier in the conversation too, but like talking about that our whole lives curriculum again, because that's the main space where I've like interacted with kids and their parents surrounding this kind of conversation. And it's hard because in those curricula, there are sort of like take home pieces at the end of each workshop. So we go through a workshop and then it's like, here's this handout, take this home and have this conversation with your family, right? And I don't know how many kids are actually doing that, first of all, because again,
Probably not many.
right. And so there is that like trust piece, because I don't know at all how many of those parents are having any of this conversation in the home, and how many of them are truly just outsourcing it because it feels uncomfortable to have that conversation in the home, or because they're like, there's literally no way my kid is going to listen to me. They're not going to sit down and have a conversation. They're not going to do a notebook. They're not going to text or email. No, none of it. Right. And all of those things are fine because they're all real. They all happen.
Real talk, like again, I'm in the business of bodies and babies and vaginas all day long. My kids know this. I am the last person
Totally.
I want to have these conversations with. And the thing is, I respect that, and so I outsource it, right?
Yeah,
Like, because at
absolutely.
the end of the day, I just know how important it is that they're getting it from somewhere, and not just anywhere, but a trusted source, right?
Yes.
That's really vetted, and I know that the information is going to be scientifically based, it's going to be
Mhm.
progressive, it's going to be inclusive, all of those things. And
Yeah.
so if that changes at any point, I'm totally here for that, and they know that. They do not want to talk to me about it, and that's all right.
Well, and that might provide the space later on in life for them to feel totally comfortable to come and talk to you about anything. once they have this information in their bones and it's embodied and they feel comfortable with it in themselves, then it's like, oh yeah, I already know I can talk to mom about this.
Yes.
Right. And that's awesome.
And this is one of those things too, like, we've talked a little bit about like in previous weeks on like body autonomy and things like that, right? And so I feel like this is an extension of that but I will say that's the one place where it's stopped, like where I'm just like, so I signed you up for this and you're going, like it's not a choice, right?
Right.
So
Right.
you can choose if you wanted to have this conversation with me, you want to do a deep dive, totally fine. But if you don't, this is the option, but it's happening either way, right? There is no choice. There is no negotiation in that. And again, I look at it from an empowerment piece and just making sure, just like we teach them how to blow their nose and tie their shoes, like this is another part of those, like check the parenting boxes and make sure that my human is ready to go out and be a productive member of our society.
Well, and it's that important or more important, right? Because it's literally like the line between, or one of the lines, I guess, between like perpetual bodily trauma and not.
That's such an excellent point. Yes.
Yeah. And so that's another piece that was coming up for me big time is like, so to go a little bit binary on you right now, boys, girls, male, female, vagina, penis, straight up. Like, we know that there are things attached to those body parts in our society that make a big difference in how people are treated based on that, right? So like in this context, it's like, it's kind of shameful and kind of weird, but if you have a wet dream, it's fine and it's normal and it's cool. But oh my God, you started your period, you better hide your tampon when you're going to the bathroom. Don't talk about it, nothing. And if you have sex, you're a slut.
But if he has sex, then he scored and it was awesome.
And we're still there.
Yep.
We're still there. And also I want to contextualize and then move into like where that thought is heading for me. Like I want to contextualize what it is to be a parent having this conversation right now, because we're still facing the same stuff. In North Carolina, there is a ballot on the table right now to basically provide a loophole for rapists so that they can, it is not, if this ballot goes through, it will not be legal to withdraw consent after a sex act has started.
I got nauseous when I read through it.
Yeah. And that's the context right now. So this is truly revolutionary and radical work as a parent to be moving in this direction, because we are still fighting. It is still an active every second fight. And, we're also still dealing with like ridiculous abortion laws and all sorts of laws. It's still happening. And it's still sometimes just an emergency to be in a body that has a womb. Like it really is. And so the first time that I taught the middle school our whole lives curriculum, the lesson on consent, I had no girls in the room. None of the girls in the class came to that one. It wasn't because of the topic. It was just because that's how it ended up. But I taught about consent to a room full of boys. And it was one of the most magical days of my life. Like I came out of that being like, oh my God, it landed for every single one of them. Like all I had to say was, and I've said this already, but all I had to say was, when your parents or your family members tell you that you have to hug Aunt Debbie and you don't want to hug Aunt Debbie, well, you don't have to hug Aunt Debbie. Even if everyone around you is telling you, you don't have to. Nope. And they were all like, oh. Like it's still that's where the conversation still is, because our conversations about consent are so limited, and especially like we're not having those conversations with boys all the time, right? We're telling girls how to protect themselves.
Right. Yes. Let's camp out there for a second, because I think I'm so glad that you brought up consent, because it was also swimming around in my brain. That it's a really important part of these educational pieces that, we're offering to you. And it really does start with those conversations that more are an extension of body autonomy and what that means.
Yes.
yes, that translates into medical spaces, and we can talk about that at another time. But as it relates to this and the education that we are providing our young people, it does start with the simple act of if you don't want to hug or kiss this person, even if that person is family, it's okay to say no. And if you're doing something and then you change your mind, it's okay to stop and say no then too.
Yes.
And
Yes.
again, without shame, um, without, cajoling, like, "Oh, come on, it's okay." Like, that's how we teach them that like, how to have their defenses worn down.
Yeah,
And
and it's going to teach them that their bodies don't belong to them.
yes. Yep. That it's more important to, help someone else feel good, to not hurt someone else's feelings, than it is to respect what your inner self is telling you is the right thing to do.
And you know that that falls on womb carriers far more often than it does
Yeah.
on those who are not carrying wombs.
It really does. Also tickling, that's another really great area to practice. And I'm thinking about what this can look like, and this starts very young, really. And, if as soon as you have a child that is crawling, that is truly separated from you, and can be away, and someone else can come in, um, those crawling babies are actually really good at letting us know what they like and what they don't like, right? If they don't want to be with a person, they fuss, they squirm, they wriggle their way away, and generally speaking, we respect that. We don't make them stay with that person. But at some point it shifts,
Mhm.
and, um, how magical would it be if we start to create environments where it doesn't ever shift?
Yeah.
That we give the same weight and the same respect to the baby that's fussing and causing a stink because they don't wanna be held by somebody, as we do to the toddler who's like, "Don't tickle me," and we
Mhm.
actually stop.
Yeah.
Or and it just continues on from there. If that's all that they ever know, they then are able to identify that lack in their peers and say, "Hey, you don't have to do that." Like,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
And
And
then
that
and then
that
they
peer
become the
education.
masters of the knowledge, and we get to sit back and be like, "Wow, that's a really beautiful moment,"
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes. The number of like impromptu sex ed lessons that I gave in high school to my peers, like for real. Like I've always been doing this. And it really like that peer education is so powerful because when you're actually talking about it with your friends as a young kid, like that's just a safe space. It just more
For
often
sure.
than not is.
And again, I think that's I'm gonna bring that shame piece up again, because I think so often as parents, we it's like that, "Oh, I don't want my kid to be that kid on the playground," right? But what if you know that you are arming your kid with really powerful information, and so then they can go and be that kid on the playground without shame, and just put out the facts, and not have it be, an issue or a negative or anything like that. It's just like you're creating this little, I was gonna say army, but I don't like that word either. Like, this little, crew of kids that's like, "We're gonna go out and change the world and start changing the narratives around these conversations," right? And then when they get to be parents, we don't have to have after dark conversations because 'cause they're gonna be like, "Psh, I don't need that,"
I got it.
right? I got
Yep.
it. Yeah.
Totally.
I love
Totally.
I love the idea of that in the future. I'm thinking about it too, like you brought up how you've always been doing this peer education piece, like even in high school. Like high schools need kids like that still right now, honestly, more
Oh, yeah.
now more than ever because of their lives being ingrained by social media.
Mhm.
Um, and rapid fire too.
Yeah.
TikTok, Snapchat,
Yeah.
Instagram, Facebook,
Yeah.
all of these different things that sometimes are spot on, other times not so much, right?
There's
And
access to good information and misinformation.
always,
Always.
yes, always, literally in every context. And so again, putting them in a position to know the difference, right? And again, whether that's coming from you or from a trusted source, right? Like making sure that they have it so that when they see it, not if they see it, when they see it, because that's absolutely happening, that they can say, that seems a bit off, right? Or if they get that snap from a friend, they can be like, dude, this is trash. Like, this isn't even true.
Yeah,
Right?
totally.
Yes.
Yeah, and just have those comfortable conversations, just easy,
Yeah.
like, oh no, that's false, but here's the fact.
Right.
You can actually respond with that.
Exactly. But that was the thing. Like, we can't just have them know enough to be like, that seems off base, right? They also need to be able to then fill in and say, oh, hey, here's your missing piece.
And that's why the intricacies are so important. So, like, sure, we teach reproductive anatomy, but if you watched our After Dark from like not the last one, but the one before that with the reproductive anatomy and physiology, you can see just how much is missing from our just your average anatomy and physiology textbook, even. Like, so much is missing. And so, but we need all of those little pieces of information because we also have to understand different physiologies of response, right? We have to understand, like, somebody's brain might not be saying yes to you, even if their body is. And that is something you need to respect. And I can say from personal experience that my body has said yes when my brain was saying no, but I said yes out loud because I didn't want to hurt somebody's feelings.
Absolutely. I've also been there many times.
Like, honestly, what person with a vagina hasn't? Like, we're taught to please in that way. We're taught not to make people upset by holding boundaries, even when it comes to our very own bodies, which we own, but we're taught that we don't. Like, right. So we have to be that radical in, like, changing the conversation and saying, like, you know, if we're just going to be really raw about it, like, yeah, you might be wet and you still might not want to have sex.
And that's okay.
That's okay. 100%.
Yeah, that's okay.
So, and to have the other person on the other end also know that and also recognize that and also still ask.
Yeah.
You always have to ask, right? So,
always. Yes. Always. Even in the context of a marital relationship, which that's like, gosh, that is a whole nother conversation for sure. Like, we should schedule a time maybe to have an in-person conversation that's literally all about consent within partnerships and marriages.
Yes, because it goes missed. That is also such a huge piece that goes missed all the time.
It really is. So, like, we're going to put a pin in that for sure and revisit, because I think that is a really valuable time or space for us to spend some time in. So I want to do like a recap of the things that we've touched on tonight, because there's so many pieces. Really, really, at the end of the day, as parents and caregivers, when we're coming into that space of having the awkward conversations, right? First and foremost, like, focus on coming to a place of neutrality for yourself, right? That's probably going to mean going through the great unlearn. And if that's what it means for you, just keep coming back to visit us. So we're going to keep digging in. And all different topics to facilitate that unlearning process and hopefully fill you back up with pieces that you can take on and apply in new ways. So that would be fantastic. But working towards that place of neutrality first and foremost, going through the unlearning, right? And then practicing consent, like
modeling and then teaching it.
Yes, modeling and teaching, so important, right? Because if we're not talking, our kids are they're watching and they're listening. And that might be like a one-sided phone conversation. Like, it could be a lot of things, especially right now. We're all doing life together so often. They're hearing our meetings. They're hearing all types of interactions that they've never heard before. And so if they're seeing you show up all the time and you're modeling the opposite of what you're telling them that they need to be doing, again, there's some unlearning that probably needs to happen and go on. So, yes, leaning into that consent piece in every way, shape, or form. Shoot, start with pizza. I don't know. Pick something that's so innocuous and easy, right? Like, and just leave it as a space for empowerment. Don't be afraid to go outside the box and utilize Jesus. Thanks for that. Don't be afraid to go outside of the box and utilize other tools that take the pressure off, right? We started off talking about utilizing a notebook. Have a question box. I think that's a great idea, even in a home, right? Use text messages with older kids. Also, sometimes utilizing the time you have in the car when you're both focused on something else, but you can kind of slip little things in there, but that it's not that dead on, like I'm in your face having a conversation, can be a
Mhm.
great time to capitalize on that as well.
Yeah, I like
Um, yes. Am I forgetting anything?
I feel like those were the big pieces. There's always a good chance because it is 9:10 on a Thursday. That
Absolutely. And also, I guess probably the final piece to bring us home and why we're all here is utilize trusted resources. If you don't feel like it's something you could take on yourself, it's okay to know your limitations, right? And to know that this is not going to land well coming from me. They really need to hear it from somebody else. That's half the battle sometimes. So we're one of those trusted resources. Like we've
Yeah.
alluded to this a little bit, but coming this fall, we're going to be offering classes and workshops on this very thing. Let us know if you'd like to have a parenting workshop where we can come together and sit together and share space and like lean into this particular conversation more so that you feel really equipped and empowered to go out and do the work yourself, or send them over to us and we'll do some of the heavy lifting for you. We would be
Yeah.
honored to share that space with your young people.
Love it.
Um, and as always, too, let us know what you want to talk about in this space because really it is a community space and it's for you way more than it is for us.
Yeah.
We talk to each other and on camera like so many hours during the course of a week that we want to make sure that we're doing things that are beneficial to you. So you can always drop a comment here, even if you're watching this days later. Always follow up with us at Red Birth Green on Instagram. These get uploaded to our IGTV, which makes it easy for sharing. And you can always send us a message at redbirthgreen.com/contact. And we love to chat and get you connected to resources, birth support, all of the good things. So
Yes.
until next week, be good to yourselves. Make sure you're hydrating and resting. And we'll see you soon.